obviously we stayed up, and we did stay up pretty comfortably in the end. Losing the big characters was something you probably thought, okay, that's going to be a big change. Did we think we'd hit the ground running and finish where we finished? Of course not. Again, you'd be looking for consolidation. But I think because of the ownership and the manager in there, they probably wanted a different perspective on what the team looked like. If you talk about those players you're on about there, you get to a certain age and then you've got to develop again. You've got to change the team, which Fergie always did at Manchester United, to make those harsh, ruthless decisions. And that's what the owners and Alan did at that time. It was a brave one to do because them guys that you've talked about were entrenched in what Newcastle had been through over the last 3 or 4 years. But, once we got rolling into that new season and you've seen some of those players that just hit the ground running in the form. I mean, Cabaye was terrific, by the way. I mean, Cabaye was the one that came in and really changed that. He brought the quality up in everybody else. When you start putting good players in, the players who aren't as good then start to lift themselves as well. Czech Tiote came in and absolutely bossed it for the season. He was an unknown. People didn't really want to play against him. He was so him and Cabaye in the middle of the park really set things off. And of course you had Colaccini there who came in and did a really good job as captain and started having real unity. But not only was he a really good captain, he had real quality, so he had real quality. And it was one of those seasons where everything just hit and it all blended together. And I remember, obviously, we went, I think it was Everton, the last game of the season. I knew we needed to win and somebody else needed to lose. And it was still a tall order. But you were still clinging on to hope the fact that we could get fourth, this would be incredible. But to finish, if we would have finished in the top 10, we would have been delighted. But we finished fifth. We got a Europa League place. And we were all just like, yeah, this is a good team. I remember saying to John Carver on the party, when we're there, you're looking around going, and you just know as a coach, you go, these aren't bad, these lads, these are good. These are not bad. These are full of confidence. Do you know what they didn't have? Because it was a lot of them were first years in the Premier League. They'd hit the ground running they had no fear because they didn't have any expectation. They just came in. They didn't know what it was about. It was all enthusiasm. It was all gusto. And things were coming off. And they just ran with it. And it just lasted for the whole season. I mean, Papa Cisse coming in as well, I think in the January, made a big difference. I think he came in the January. And he just gave you that little bit of impetus with his goals to push you on to the next level. So all the signings were working. Everything was going in a positive direction. And then you move on a couple of seasons and it didn't quite work, some of the signings. But to start with, they did work.
Yeah, staying on the good times.
Yes.
Yeah, Yohan Cabaye was comfortably our best midfielder since Rob Lee. It was absolutely unreal. But when you look at players like Hatton Ben Arfa, okay, we lost some big characters, like Johnny said there, your Nolans, your Bartons. But how did you, as a coach and staff, go about dealing with Hatton Ben Arfa day to day? Because he's a player that's fairly renowned now to kind of spit his dummy out every now and again.
Yeah, with Hatton, it was you had to give him a bit of love, I suppose. You had to. You weren't pandering to him. Of course, you can't do that with any player on the team because all the other players are looking at you think, well, is he getting special treatment? But also, he was. You sort of had to make him feel wanted. You had to get him the ball as much as you possibly could to do what he wanted to do with the ball, and he could damage when he got it. Of course, out of possession, there was holes in the team, and there was problem areas where he was too high and wide and the rest of it. But we recognised that and tried to cover those positions. But dealing with on a day-to-day basis, of course, could have been. Was it difficult? I don't know if it was difficult. I think it was just more about just managing him, and you understand. But you're also managing all the other players at the same time. His sort of days would have been more up and down than, say, like Colaccini, who was pretty much solid, or Jonas Gutierrez, who was solid. You just had to be aware of where he was that morning. And as coaches, you are trained observers. You're watching, looking all the time to see what players' moods are about, what's happening at home, what's going on with their families. And that can make a big difference whether they're settled in the area to how they perform. So you're always looking at Hatton in them sort of areas before you went out in the training ground to see where he was, what his mood was about. But then even trying to do that, sometimes he could be, had that funny walk with a little bit of shoulders down, the rest of it, and then he'd turn on training, he'd go, oh my God, this boy's incredible, So you never knew quite what you were going to get. But also, if you look at wide players over the years, they're always like that. I played wide, and they're inconsistent. You know, it's how much can you get in the ball, and it's how much damage can they do, and how much can they affect the game. Wide players can be inconsistent, and Hatan was no different to any more wide players. But his highs were really, really high, weren't they? That's what you see. His highs were really high, and of course the lows are probably lower than most players.
Towards obviously that end of that season, 5th place, and again, wildest of dreams we've mentioned. That summer, how frustrated were yourself and Alan, probably in particular, because you said Alan had the most communication with Mike, for example, in regards to transfers coming in, because only Vernon and Anita came in of real note in terms of really coming into that first team. What conversations were you having in the first couple of games of that season going, was it more a case of, can we just get a couple of more bodies in? Do you think the hierarchy at the time understood what Europa League and the Premier League was going to do to this team?
I don't think anybody did. I don't think. I think as the owners, they'd never been there before. Us as coaching staff had never been there before. I think there wasn't frustration to start with, because you're still on a high and you're still rolling from the season before. As a coach, Alan would have been having those conversations on trying to get more players in. There would have been his frustration that would have come through. But what we did do with the Europa League, we actually played a lot of the younger lads. You know, there'd be Sammy Amiomu would play a lot of them games, and you know, Rolando Aarons and people like that would all, Paul Dummett would start to come in. All them sort of players would come in to be given a chance. The difficult thing is, when you do Europa League, it's the time you get back at 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning after a Thursday night game on a Friday, and you have no time to work on the training ground on what you're doing on a Saturday. So that's what we were missing. So the playing side of it, yes, of course, we probably needed a few more bodies to try and help us out. But you'll see even teams that are working in the Premier League now that still struggle, even though they've got really big squads. When they're, you know, like some Wolves and a few others have struggled over the years. That's especially that start of the season. What you find is you have that many games, your league form suffers, and then all of a sudden you're playing catch up, and then confidence is gone because you're playing catch up. So you're not on the same roll as what you were the season before. So it's not just about the bodies, it's about dealing with getting back late at night, and your players are then having to recover to play a Premier League game, which is the toughest league in the world. That's where the problem was, and you got no time to work with your players or a team on the training ground at all. None. You've got none. You recovery, you play. You recovery, you play. You recovery, you play. And after a while, that starts to take its toll. So that's where the problems were, not so much the signings.
In terms of incomings, you say there, but obviously when you've had a successful season and Newcastle aren't the financial power that maybe we are now, who knows? Yeah. But when teams come sniffing around players like Yohan Cabaye, Demba Ba, how did you kind of keep them focused? Because they didn't leave straight away, did they? I remember Cabaye, did he refuse to train? Was that true?
Yeah. No, I didn't refuse to train. There'd obviously just been an offer came in from before the Arsenal game. I think we played Arsenal first game of the season. I think it was Arsenal, Man City, one of the two. And he was just saying, you know, well, there's an offer came in. I can't really get injured playing in this game when I've got such a big move coming along. And it was just a little bit close to kick off. That was the only problem for us. You know, it was pretty close to kick off, and he was obviously protecting himself, which players do these days, and you have no issue with that. You know, they've got some big moves. So trying to actually, Yohan didn't move then. I think he then moved either in the January of the next season or something like. So trying to keep him focused was then obviously difficult because he'd seen his big move, and I'm not sure where exactly it was and whether he was going to Arsenal or somewhere that had collapsed, and that can be difficult for a player. And that player's then trying to look after himself again, knowing that team's coming around again in the January window. So you end up, the player does lose focus, even if he says he's not losing focus, and even if he says I'm trying my best, it must be incredibly difficult for him to try and do that. So trying to keep him going or trying to promise him stuff at the end of the season was probably what we did. But it was a difficult period, not only for the team, but for him, because he was the linchpin of the team. Everything went through him. Everything creative went through him. So all of a sudden, you've lost that little bit of an edge just off. Even using 5-10%, you lost that. So it was difficult. But Yohan was still good around the building. He was still a great character. He still wanted to work hard. He still tried to do the right things, and he still appreciated what the fans were giving him on a Saturday. You know, he was well liked, and he still tried to put his lot in. But psychologically, somewhere along the line, it has to affect you. It has to affect you. And then again, that rubs off on everybody else as well. So what you're trying to do, you're trying to add and keep your best players. And at this time, we were starting to lose our best players, and we weren't quite adding the quality of a Cabaye coming in. So it did affect us, of course it did.